The game I'm going to show you is personal for me, as it was played by my son. But that's not the reason I want to show it to you. In this game, my son unleashed an absolutely devastating attack on his opponent. He started the game with the move d4, and his opponent played g6. After knight c3, bishop g7, and bishop f4, we have a setup for London Jababa system. London system itself starts with the move d4, and then the bishop goes to f4. The knight, though, develops to squares d2, and the pawn goes usually to c4 or c3. But in Jabava London, the knight goes to c3, and this is a more aggressive opening, while a regular London system is more positional game. After knight played e6, and after knight b5, we have an attack on the pawn c7, threatening a fork to win the rook. Logical response is d6, blocking the diagonal for the bishop. My son went back knight c3. It's a weird looking move, and the reason he did that, it's an online game, and he totally expected the opponent to play a6 and pre-moved the retreat of the knight to a square c3. Black played knight e7, e4, gaining the center for white, short castle, queen goes to d2, preparing the long castle, b6, preparing fianchetto of the light square bishop for black, bishop develops to e2, leaving some options open to maybe castle short side, bishop goes to b7 and a long castle, knight goes to d7, so black has two very active bishops on nice diagonals, and white have the center. f3, supporting the pawn on e4, black goes queen c8, their idea is possibly to go bishop a6, offer the exchange of the light square bishops, and h4. Anytime the castles are made in two different sides, long castle for white in this case, and short castle for black, we can expect a very aggressive game with white attacking on the king side of the board and black attacking on the queen side of the board. So h4 starts an immediate attack on the black king. Rook goes to d8, ignoring the white attack, and h5, trying to take the pawn on g6 and open the file for the rook on file h. c5, black wants to counterattack on the queen side of the board and challenge white center. d5, blocking black's attempts, exchange the pawns on d5, and bishop takes on c3. That's an instructive mistake. In those type of positions, when the bishop is on g7, you almost never want to exchange it for a knight if you are black, because now the dark square bishop for white becomes an absolute monster and will exploit the weak squares, dark squares around the black king. Bishop to queen takes c3, and now knight takes d5, so black won a pawn. But again, losing the bishop, the dark square bishop, was critical mistake. And now my son sacrifices the rook. Rook takes d5. Bishop takes d5. Exchange the pawns on g6 and bishop h6. Again, exploiting the weaknesses of the dark squares near the king. The threat is queen g7 checkmate. Knight e5, blocking the diagonal for the queen. f4, trying to kick the knight out. But bishop takes g2, attacking the rook. And now my son, playing white, sacrifices another rook and takes the knight on e5. Black takes the rook on h1. And after e takes d6, there is another threat of a checkmate on g7, and again white are playing without two rooks right now. Rook d7 protecting the square g7, but white unleashes another bishop into attack. Bishop c4 check. The only move to block the king is rook f7, and using the pin, final move of the game, queen g7 checkmate.